So today's topic is the conference is located in the Avantex Agora apparel sourcing with an international offering. And we know that all exhibitors here, as the fashion industry requests us, will do business and provide solutions to the market thanks to developed services. So more services, an essential asset to conquer and outreach new markets. We have many speakers today, so all of you will have a chance to say a word, to talk about all this. And instead of introducing you, I will just give you the floor. You will explain who you are, what you do, in a few words. Madame Chanel, you're the CEO of Chanel, Procédé Chanel, which is a company, family-owned company. I'm the fourth generation of manager, and we work on paper architecture. We work with designers, and we come up with systems like lightings, pieces of furniture, ceilings, partitions, so that designers can present their creations during public exhibitions. So it's service for your customers and for your markets. We'll come back to this. Martin, who is on my right-hand side. Martin, you are managing a company. Yes, I work with the associates, and we work with two houses, Caillarda style furniture for export market and for some Parisian palaces, and more than 2-century-old maison, Émaux de Longwy enamels, creating fine objects decorated with enamels, which are in fact pieces of collection. So these maisons heavily focus on the products, and just like it is the case for the French craftsmen, they were not really interested in services. Yes, we'll come back to this. Philippe Cain, you are a consultant and sending us signals. So thank you for being with us today. Well, Signaux Faibles, weak signals. It's about trying to understand what is about to happen in the future, really in the future, but in the present, collected all kind of information. And it's possible if you want to take a chance and read. So the service must be accessible if you can read. So you need to read the newsletters. Yes, it's the Signaux Faibles newsletter. That's what you need to read. Continuing with Grégoire. Grégoire is in charge of Armand Luxe Communication Department. Grégoire Guillon. Yes, Armand Luxe celebrated its 80th anniversary last week. They're based in Bretagne, in Quimper. There are about 550 employees, and we have two businesses, one traditional, ready-to-wear, and another one developed these last 15 years, professional clothes and a brand image like La Poste or SNCF. So yeah, that's this notion of service for a customer. This needs also to include a logistics part. Muriel Piazet, MP Consulting, fashion consultant, working on the luxury jewelry. Well, hello. Thank you for having me today. I've created an international business company 7 years ago, helping brands to develop in France, but also abroad. Therefore, my role is about focusing on the commercial strategy, helping my customers opening new markets and getting the right resources for it. Services are 10 times more important than they used to be because of the situation, because of the digital technologies as well. So we have to back this development up. Before this, I was a director of Salon de la Mode in Paris, and also other affairs in New York and in Japan. Therefore, I have a 360-degree vision of potential development of all these segments. Marianne Gelly, a stylist, a creator, designer, and she will explain what she does. Studio Marianne Gelly. My name is Marianne Gelly, and I created my own studio, Studio Marianne Gelly, 20 years ago. I love paper, and therefore I've developed a whole world where I can transform and process paper for very big facilities or creating precious objects. But what we love to do is to transform it completely to enter fairyland, if you like. Yes, we need to, it's about, you help people, make them dream. Yes, exactly, that's a very useful service. Considering the word of fashion and fashion industry, it is quite true that being able to dream is something extremely important, and we know what it means in terms of sourcing and materials and so on and so forth. Talking about fashion, Catherine Mercadier-Saflic, thank you for having me. My career path is not usual. I'm an economist, specialized on perspectives and experts in the aging policies. A few months ago, I set up En Mode Création, which is the first fashion for senior agency. Our role is to provide tips on socio-economic challenges for people over 60 years old, and we also decided to specifically talk to industrial companies in the textile and the garment industry so that they can focus on elderly people, people over 60 years old. So our point of view is to come up with an offer that will enable us to work on the whole value chain, not only a matter of communication and marketing, but we really want to make sure that considering this generation and these people, expectations and values and desires, we want to make sure that all this is integrated in the value chain of the company. Igor, as a designer, what can you do? Igor Grossman, you know, how can you do all this? Thinking about young people, older people, choosing the right materials. And you are wearing your own jacket. Yeah, Sophie created it for me. Well, I work on design, but using paper mainly, just like Marianne and Sophie. My work is experimental, utopist, but perhaps. So some pieces we create that are wearable, but I want to create things with paper. Therefore, I worked with Sophie Chanel, and Sophie's company opened up my eyes to a new option thanks to the machine she has to cut and draw paper. So I've discovered non-woven materials, which is something new to me, but of course you can wear these elements and reuse them. Sophie, non-woven materials is a product that used to be quite common waves. Today is being revived. You work only with non-woven materials? Pretty much exclusively, because they have very interesting technical properties. We can mix important things like glass fiber, for instance, for dimensional qualities and properties, polyester as well, to get a good pricing. Cellulose. Usually non-woven materials will help you come up with a recipe, if you like, that will match your desire. It's about cooking things up. When you work with textiles, you work with fibers, but not woven materials, like a soup, if you like, and you come up with the ingredients, and you spread them. I don't want to get too technical, but you'd have a humid or non-woven material like paper or dry non-woven materials, and you can mix the whole thing up. So we are interested indeed in developing fibers with the help of industrial partners. I hope that on Advantex you can find technological solutions. You talked about pricing, but let's not focus on this now. We know that this notion is important. You have a product, you have a price, okay, right. If we are to focus on this notion of service, Philippe, but the idea of service, since you are an all-sector observer, how would you define, how would you describe the different services that could be provided by an industrial player or a designer or retailer? Or I hope the question is not too complex for you. No. Well, I'm not focusing on the immediate period. Well, I have 10 little comments to make. Today, there are 10 different revolutions, and that makes a lot of difference for the consumer. The consumer is not only a spectator, he's involved, he's a player. The Industrial Revolution started with the steam machine. Napoleon's army would travel just like Alexander the Great used to. So then there was the Industrial Revolution and Work Revolution. Then there was the Urban Revolution that continues the development of cities. And then Mobility Revolution, the way we travel, which is completely changing. And that will change even faster in the years to come with the autonomous car. So this notion of mobility will be completely revamped. Then we have the new technologies, nanotechnologies, biotechnologies, IT, etc. That hits absolutely everything, including the textile. Then we have the generational revolution. We live in a time where the millennials generation, no matter how you call it, represents the greatest generational shock in the story of mankind. For the first time, children teach their parents. And then you have the Z generation, they teach the millennials. So you see the complete and dramatic change of knowledge transmission. Then we have a demographic revolution. The aging of the population. China will be old before it is rich. And the world will age and turn old in about 20 years' time, 20, 25 years' time. So the world is getting old. Then we have an entrepreneurial revolution. I think we can all create something with no money. You just need to get a smartphone, a computer. When you are in Longwy, of course, you need to get some money to buy this beautiful factory. And I'm a neighbor, so I know what it means. Then there is the food revolution. We do not eat today as we used to 50 years ago. And that is huge. I'm not talking about the vegans, because that's something else, you know, it's a different kettle of fish. Because this is about non-leather materials. We do not know how to name this. We should not even say non-leather goods, but anyway. And then the farming revolution, because that completely changes all farming systems. I lost my papers as a speaker. It's climate revolution, environmental revolution, that hits everybody, of course, and all of us are more and more impacted by the ecology, which is really a bad word, but that's the word we use, even though it's a disaster. And then a social, political, and religious revolution that derives from that. So it's all linked, if you like. It started 200 years ago. The first revolution started up then, and other revolutions will occur in the years to come. Then I believe there are three fundamental elements which are the keys to understand. First of all, the revolution of knowledge. The number of A-level graduates in the world, it's huge. It's huge. Everybody is educated. We know things. In France, we still have 2.5 million students. In China, it's about 33 million. And in India, 28 million students living alone, living aside the other countries. Then we have the revolution of health, which, of course, touches the aging of the population, the self-knowledge. And then the materials have a lot to do and a lot to say. Yeah, textile will be health parameters. That will be absolutely incredible. That started 10 years ago. And something else very important to us all is the revolution of time. I mean, there is only one thing that hasn't changed is the day, the time, the date time, 24 hours. Yes, but lead times are shortened. This is what we were talking about yesterday, reducing lead times. But what you said is very right. It's a matter of motion, if you like. All these revolutions, there have always been breakthroughs and disruptions, you know, with new generations, etc., etc. So that's motion. It has to be seen in a positive light, yes. But then you have to adapt. Which are the new services to come up with, how to adjust, and how can you prepare to these revolutions? Prepare for all these changes. Yesterday we had a guest who was organizing such fairs, and he had to consider the ecological dimension. What to do with all the material when the fair is dismantled? That's a true question. That's an important question. So you have to have a green attitude. That's what you expect from the brands you work with, but even from yourself. Listening to what Philippe said, I would like to add something. That's collaborative economy, which is also very important for our business today. There is an awareness from the brands and even beyond the final consumer, the end consumer. The collaborative economy is to be found everywhere, from the physical world to the digital world. And also for the end consumer, because what we do is to recycle, is to reinvent, is to reuse materials, you know, to come up with constant innovation, recycling everything. It's quite topical. And I think that for services, this element is extremely important. It is essential and shared by all these revolutions. There's something perhaps to add. Collaborative economy, which echoes the fact that the consumer is a co-creator. Brands do know today that the consumer wants to have an impact to some extent to the product he or she will use. The jumper that you will create for Igor especially, he will like it much more and take good care of it, and therefore that jumper will have a different life cycle than other jumpers. So it's quite important. That's about the added value of fashion. What about the old people here? What did I just say? Well, going back to what has been said, well, first of all, thank you for talking about the demographic transition, because it is something that is rarely mentioned in all our debates, you know, for the textile and fashion industry. But it is a transition that is important, as important as the ecological transition. Do you know, for instance, that by 2030 there will be more people aged 60 than people under 20? So this has to be anticipated on. We have to prepare in terms of products, of offers, and of course in terms of services. The millennials we're turning to today will turn 60 in 2050. So they will want to dress and to be offered wide ranges of products and services as well, and as customized as possible. What about the creative people? I mean, you're all creative around this table with Marianne and Igor. This trend, this movement, we need to provide answers to. Studio Geli. Well, I came up with an idea. That's good. But that does not hit me in particular. As far as I remember, you know, this generation who likes to knit and create beautiful garments. I remember a fashion designer who used to work with this generation of older people to come up with unique creations. I remember an amazing jumper who had been created by an old lady, and that's a unique jumper that I always like to keep. It's as if my own grandmother had given me this gift. That's what I remember listening to you. So I believe that we can work indeed with these generations of people, as you said, Gilles. But I don't see you as someone who is older than 60. Not at all. You look like you're 20 years old. going back to Sophie, since we work together, she has interesting machines and we can play with the product and create something unique for someone. You just need to have a proper digital file and Sophie will do the cutting. And then you come up with a customized and unique product in just in a few minutes' time. And therefore you can play with all this. Machines. Do you have them made for you or do you buy them on the market for laser cutting, for instance? Well, yes. Unfortunately, we have to prepare to create those machines. That's a very big industrial risk initially. You know, a machine that has been developed after thinking about it. I have a story, you know, I had used garlands for my kid's birthday, you know, silk paper, very nice and quite cheap, hanging on the walls. And I turned to my father, who is an inventor, and I asked him if we could not create this very easily, you know, just thinking about it, since we have many tools. And said, well, okay, I'll think about it. And a month later, he had ordered machines to mechanics to create what I wanted to do. And this machine is unique and it is extremely expensive. It costs us a fortune. But, you know, this is part of French savoir-faire. We have mechanics and engineers who can create machines from specifications you give them. That's our strength, that's our asset in France. It's not to follow the rules and just duplicate what already exists. It's to have this freedom to think and create new things. Armor Luxe, what about you? Considering the size of the factories and your own know-how, you have this collaborative approach, creative and collaborative approach. Do you? With the machine suppliers? Well, yes, of course. It is quite essential. This is exactly what you said, in fact. Usually it's employees who are very smart and creative who come up with amazing ideas. Let me take an example. The knitting workshop manager, he's genius. He's able to create a so-called marinière with using 10 different colors. Well, usually that's not what you can do. So, you know, and this is the result of his reflection and his desire to innovate always, just to come up with the unique and revamped collections. So that's really very important for us. It's definitely part of our DNA. Usually, you use, even using traditional machines, is it possible to adjust? Well, I'm sure it is, but that's my question to you. Well, yes, you can always adapt. It's very easy for us because we are low-tech based, and since we have no technology, we can adapt, we can adjust, with no need to invest in big machines. But in terms of services, my position may be slightly different from what has been said so far. All the French maisons, arts and crafts French maisons, are definitely not part of the development race at all costs. They come up with another vision of this changing world. We try to protect ages-old know-how, which is quite different from what you just described, even though, of course, our customers have expectations which are linked to all these changes and revolutions. But for us, since we're lagging behind, we end up being a step ahead, because crafts and arts enable us to create customized, unique, one-off creations for one customer, so with a very high level of service. If you come up with a piece, a Longwy enamel, a Longwy decoration, which is something customized, is something that is unique for one customer. So that's the kind of service that is extremely important, and that already exists. in the French art and craft sector. And I think that we have to be aware and make the most of this service, promote it. The French art and craft has always provided this very high level of service without knowing it, because that just makes sense. So what I say about promoting it, it's not a matter of money really, but it's really to make people understand that with such products, which may seem kind of expensive, you have to consider a whole service environment, the choice of the designer, choice of colors and finishings, and sending samples and coming up with preparatory sketches and studies. So, so all this has to be valued, has to be explained to the customers. And I believe that our traditional maisons are definitely prepared to meet these needs that are growing more and more important today. Yeah, this idea of pace and rhythm is very important. The slow-made slogan is important. But usually it's something similar to fashion, the idea of rarity, of scarceness, which is linked to the traditional savoir-faire, as you just explained. And the time is necessary in this case. And people have to wait, customers have to wait. But how much this idea of waiting time of design can be true for the world of fashion? I believe that consumer is impatient or has become impatient. Do you think that the fashion industry can also play with this dual notions, long time required for your creation, for you or for me, and also considering the impatience of customers? How do you meet this need?
Il y a un dilemme entre la fast fashion et aujourd'hui et le slow wear, c'est-à-dire qu'on doit combiner.
Slow wear, fast fashion and slow wear, you have to combine both. It's an economic reality. It all depends what you're looking for. It depends what strategy you need to build. Unfortunately, fast fashion is everywhere on the market with young designers. How can brands be successful today and even start a collection to show? So this craftsmanship, these unique pieces, these collection capsules are such that in the beginning, because those are going to be small volumes, are going to take the risk of uniqueness. Over time, things are going to become more complex because, like for every business development, you have a huge problem. But today, this added value makes the difference, especially in the eyes of the press, the vision of consumers. And I agree with you on this emotional aspect. When I designed precious root just for fine jewelry, which is there to promote designers and especially the history of the brand. Today we are back into the period of storytelling to be identified. Now the problem is we have luxury, we also have fast fashion, and you cannot fight back against luxury, but you have to find a smart fashion ways, and it works. Of course, the history of the brand, and it works, the history of the brand, we had a fun example. Technologies, marinière, changing the colors, the shapes, but it remains a marinière after all at the end of it. As you like it, today we can. But this history of the marinière, long history, the background of marinière, la marinière, it's quite interesting. The founder of the company was not from Brittany, he was from Switzerland. Then he set foot in Quimper at the end of the 30s, and he created the plant and the brand called Armor Luxe. Luxe, armor because of Brittany, and Luxe for history. Luxe is the light, but it was a play on word. It just took the E at the end of luxe in French. He added luxe to armor, and it gave birth to this beautiful brand called Armor Luxe. It's history. It's interesting to have a beautiful brand and to keep it safe, to protect it. Let me give you one example. The company was bought back in the 90s by two friends, childhood friends who are not textile experts by tradition. They came from other ways of life, and they asked right and left for advice. And people told them, Armor Luxe, you have to change the name, you cannot keep, and you have to write Paris under it. When they received the advice, they knew they had to do the contrary and keep Armor Luxe as it was. So by rooting finally the brand and the company in its direct environment, which is Brittany and the sea, so it's the brand territory which has naturally been opened. So you have to respect the creator, the designer of the brand, the forefather, but sometimes you have to take the strategic turns to preserve it over time. That's what was done, and to me, the fashion impact of storytelling is questioned all the time, is put back into question. You have to put back yourself into question with every collection and recreate your own storytelling. I don't know exactly the environment of fashion, but if you ask yourself what Danone means to you, Danone today is not going to come up to your mind. Maybe Danone as it was 10, 20 years ago, but people are going to refer to Danone 30 or 40 years ago. This company has not changed its economic model, but is recreating itself every 10 years. Today in the world, people have more and more knowledge across the world, more and more knowledge. Time is more and more becoming shorter all the time. Storytelling should operate based on what you do, which must be excellent and premium, and you have to connect yourself somehow. You have to connect it to the present time, but today you can easily lose a market. Returning to storytelling, we have the example of Armor Luxe. It's a fine example. We have to be quite sincere in terms of storytelling. You have to avoid becoming artificial, and when it's artificial storytelling, it shows, it's obvious. So you have to be sincere and straightforward in your storytelling. The promise has to be kept, or else it's deadly. And you have to handle storytelling very cautiously, there is a great value, which is that of authenticity. You need to keep the genuine aspect. Whatever the product, whatever the generations of customers. So brands should rather work on this and choose to work on this at the design stage. We try to work on intergenerational, across the board aspects, and we should not concentrate on one or another type of customer base. Authenticity is one value. We talked about the ecological, organic dimension. Savoir-faire, know-how, territory is a different value, but it does create a dialogue between the members of that customer base, and it helps the brands to make headway on a broad 360 degrees vision. Then you can adjust to the needs of everybody. I wanted to add something to that regarding the background and heritage or the history of brands. I think in terms of fashion, that companies, I worked for a brand called Absorba that also manufacture things like Petit Bateau. I work on the background, the history of the brand, the 70 years, and they want to return to their fundamentals, return to their DNA. And all luxury brands which capitalize on their background, but outside luxury as well, on general market products as well. Let me mention only one event which is important to me. Today, Louis Vuitton, the owner of Grand Marché in Paris, is showing of a designer called Joana Vasconcelos from Portugal. Joana Vasconcelos, she promotes know-how. She's a feminist and she promotes femininity. And I'm referring to generations, referring to what Marianne was saying before, the expertise gained by our forefathers, and that we have to use and transfer. It's very moving. Emotion is the red thread. It's quite interesting. What you say is interesting because it's part of the services and history. We can tell today, do consumers understand cut and sewn? Is it important for consumers to understand? Now they understand easy maintenance and flexibility. It's easy how you maintain Amaryllis products. I'm going to tell you about my personal experience in my designer studio, which is in the 9th district of Paris, behind the two large department stores of Paris, Le Printemps and Galeries Lafayette. It's a showroom, it's not a store. I always visit my customers with models. I bring models, so consumers, I see them every day and they come by and visit. And it is the importance of our studio. They walk in and they're always interesting to look at the material. They test the material, they look at it, they touch it. As you said, we work on initial paper models based on cotton. It's always pleasant to touch. Touching is nice, and we use noble materials. So we have all the consumers knock on the door, on our door, and they ask us, do you teach your design, your know-how? They want to take courses, and today brands come to see us because they would love. We teach them the way we work, and they would love a brainstorming with their teams. And recently, I was happy to have a big brand. They have asked me to come with their creative team to give them an out-of-the-box training course to teach them in our studio to see what our creative process is all about. To return to that, in Longwy, we have opened workshops in Longwy to create backdrops open to the public. It's very successful, and we have to turn people down. Very successful because consumers want to take ownership of our know-how. They are aware of the difficulties there is in doing this. 3 hours of workshop, one shot is difficult, but doing it regularly is more difficult. I'm quite optimistic when it comes to slow wear and fast fashion. I'm not in the field of fashion, but I'm aware there's a growing interest for these production which follow another pace. It's not going to be mass market. It's not going to be mass market when you produce and manufacture in France. You shouldn't aim at this. For the companies I work for, it's not going to be there, but I think there is some greediness and there's a growing appetite for this type of different production and for this type of products. It's true. People want a beautiful piece, This is a major question mark for the future I have. Is tomorrow going to be the city, or is tomorrow going to be the life out of city? Is the city going to be the most polluted atmosphere? Is the countryside going to be a polluted environment, or is it going to be 100% healthy? So we are divided between these two universes and atmospheres, dominated by numerical, and having countryside seminars or gatherings and take out of your closet old sweaters. I don't know, I'm a perspectivist. I don't know what the next 20 or 30 years are going to be. We are one foot into both worlds. Having everything, your cake and eat it too, there is a limit to numerical aspects. Silicon, the field necessary to manufacture everything which is digital. We don't have everything digital. Maybe in 10 years the growth of digital is so strong. We don't know if we'll have enough strength and enough electricity and power to operate everything with digital products. I cannot answer your broad question, but it seems to me that one possible answer would be to return to this round table. One possible answer would be access to services, and what services are going to be within our reach in urban atmosphere or in the countryside. Which services are going to be accessible to us wherever we are. All the changes to give better access to offers, access to services, it's going to help us choose the place where we want to live tomorrow and today. In fact, services today are everywhere. Services are everywhere today. Why? Because digitalization is such that everybody is using a computer all the time, so human beings are in the background. And today we are at full speed back into the human. Let's return to fashion. Brands need more and more ready-to-wear, so they need experts like us for ready-to-wear to serve customers better, services in shops, in shows, services everywhere. Brands need that because we need to recreate this link, because social networks are great, but it has erased this link. Look at this round table. It was fun to organize this round table. You did not know each other before, and it seems you're going to start working together. You're going to start working together in the future, I'm sure. I'd like to return to what you were just saying on this notion of service and the links and the mix between various media. And I use paper a lot. I work on paper, which is a noble media. Recently, over the last few years, I got a request, slow request on the paper media for well-being cards and New Year or Christmas cards. But this year I've received a request from large houses to create a special link, connection with their customers, and their requests were different. But they wanted to work with us, next to us, to get this feeling, this touch. And I was delighted to receive their requests. We have received a lot of orders from major designers who wanted to have special, it's only a small piece of paper, but it's customized. I know somebody who loves to have a small piece of paper in her pocket because it's soft. She puts it in her pocket and she loves to look at this piece of paper. You have your iPhone in one pocket and this small piece of paper with a beautiful color in the other pocket. we are thinking at finding the best service, to apologize for that service somehow, and to provide services in terms of recycling, to provide services in terms of adding value to our imprint. So what do? We work a lot in shows. Quid. I'm going to tell you what's going to be dismantled. You're not going to like this. We're going to burn, and we buy 30 tons of paper every year, and 30 tons of paper are not always for sustainable use, but it's going to be used for 1 hour, 2 hours, 1 hour. Fashion show lasts 1 hour and a half max. So the best service we can provide our customers is to give them a moral support. It's okay, that's what we do with our waste paper. We don't have much industrial results. We have a few good ideas to recycle papers. We work a lot with designers because often designers have the solutions. It's important to say that the role we are all playing. We have a promise. You have organized in the field of recycling at Amarlux. I've received a program. Can you talk about it? Is it top secret? No, it's not a secret, and good ideas in terms of recycling are always good, and they can be shared by our competitors. In the textile industry, we create a lot of waste, a lot of industrial waste. We have little added value with plastic experts and a major manufacturer of sport garment or manufacturer called Conquérir. We have recycled cotton polyester material, pieces of material, and they've been crushed and they've been injected into the industrial process in the plastic industry to manufacture a ping pong racket made of recycled fabric. We cannot recycle all our industrial waste, not all of it, but it's a real project, R&D project that has lasted 3 years. It's long, a 3-year R&D project. 3 years is long, but the result was good. So beyond, we were satisfied to produce this table tennis racket, but it's good to be creative in this open loop. In the textile industry, we often believe that we are going to recreate a new product with an old end-of-life product. No, you have to open up. You have to open up to other industries, other fields, other sectors where there's a real need and different applications. That's a real problem. The problem is to identify potential partners. We have a lot of waste. You know, a lot of people around this, across the world. It would be a good idea to identify partners. It's complex to be able to identify partners in need of our waste products. I wanted to specify my studio needs a lot of material from Procédé Chanel for all our large installations, for all our large events in France. The idea was I always start my appointments by saying, this is the type of material, how are we going to reuse them after the event? So we try to reuse them for a dancing school, for a backdrop at the Opera House in Paris. This is my personal approach, systematic approach, when I meet my customers, because this type of material, because it's non-woven, with a material mix, a mix of materials. So I try as much as possible to be reused in a school. It can be reused by the same customer to be reused. I would love that our friend from Outlook, how you've been able to reuse, how you've been able to win new markets to reuse this material. Waste. Have you been considering, because have you been at the end of use for train conductor uniforms, because you manufacture train conductor uniforms? Do you have a way to reuse these uniforms when they are old and torn? How to win new markets? Basically, we were supplying post office uniforms, and one day they have decided to outsource their uniforms. It was a major loss for us because we are manufacturing a lot of apparel for the French post office. We did not want to lose that post office market. So we answered the call for tender from the French post office, and we said to them, we as textile manufacturers, we are able to modify the rationale and to turn from textile manufacturers to do something else, to provide new services, IT, logistics, because we had to provide garments and apparel to 130,000 post office agents across France. And we have used this example to win other markets, such as the French railways, SNCF. It took us very little time to change, to adjust, to change the paradigm. In the past, we were just textile manufacturers, and we became logisticians. And we were successful because in a very short period of time, it was possible for us because we had a human size, not an industrial size, and we were able to adjust, to comply, to be able to do that, to adjust, to adapt. It is now 15 years we have been strong on the professional garment market, and we are quite successful, and we have developed a real know-how. Second part of your question is on the end-of-life cycle for garments. The French railways were very specific in their call for tender specifications. They wanted that the old uniforms be recycled. So we did set up a collection sorting system to sort time and count. We recycle old SNCF uniforms and we give them away to NGOs, and we add value to old torn railway people uniforms. We've done it. It represents 120 tons of fabric. So it's big. So for professional garments, it was a new initiative. It was unknown before. No other French public company has ever done that before. Do you have questions you want to ask each other? This is the end of this round table. I can see the emergence of a concern is the lack of consumption in fashion. Are you aware of this? We are talking of recycling, which is quite typical, but the decrease of consumption, are you aware of that? For many years, the French Fashion Institute has been talking for a lack of consumption, declining consumption in fashion. It's quite complex today. Yes, there's a decrease of consumption. People want to consume in a better way. That's important. That's why slow wear is growing from upstream to downstream. luxury is working through small designers. Women ready-to-wear is suffering most. For men it's better. Jewelry is on increasing, especially the women ready-to-wear fashion sector, which is suffering most badly. Stopping, closing shop. If we talk about distribution, because distribution is suffering. Distribution scheme is changing with the decline of multi-brands in France. Of course, we still have department stores which remain very active, and we have concept stores which are still very active with unique pieces, objects we keep in connection with our background. We have Merci today, Colette in Paris. So we are true in a very complex situation in terms of fashion consumption. We have to be honest. Even large chains has lost market shares because they don't keep their promise. They have been suffering by a lot of scandals. So consumers are more and more aware through social networks, and we are in a real-time awareness where services are becoming more and more important ones. What you're saying is very true. Brands have lost market shares. It's true. It's only a summary, what I said, but purchasing power is one important factor. And people don't choose to spend their money on textile. People still buy garments, but their priority is elsewhere. The challenge for brands, Armor brand is not a fashion brand, but the challenge for us is to combine physical and digital creation and manufacturing. The answer is not simple. The answer is not a simple one. It's an approach of services which is quite specific, but also necessary. Each service remains a notion. Yes, the notion of service has to be approached differently. Yes, I wanted to add something else. We see there is a lack of consumption, a decline in consumption. One potential solution and an economic challenge for the fashion industry and the garment industry is to turn to emerging niche markets, and to become interested in the way of life of people. And not only their own customers, they have to look around at the way of life in France and elsewhere. By combining economic and society challenges, brands should become interested in niche markets with a targeted offer, well adjusted to these niche markets, meeting the expectations of these niche markets. Today we realize that most brands are becoming interested in manufacture clothing for the people under the age of 30, but those who have the purchasing power are over the age of 50, because in terms of yearly purchasing power, the young people spend very little money in textile, and the offering is only oriented for people under the age of 30. So something else should be done, because what about this story about millennials? I read that in the fashion press. We had the feeling that only this part of the population, the young people, were mastering computer and digital products, which is true, but they don't have the money. But somebody who lives in the countryside or in the suburbs, the behavior can be very different, but can be also very similar in many ways. So there is not a unique type of consumer. In other ways, we need to have a 360-degree vision, a broad vision. And in terms of aging, we have only one single communication and marketing vision or approach. It's not because a brand is going to bring one senior person into communication that they are going to bring in and attract all the senior people in terms of values and morphology. So we have to review the entire offering. So what we suggest in terms of design is to support brands to invent and come up with the fashion senior of the future. Thank you. I'm the fashion senior for the future. I'm very, very happy to be the future senior, the fashion senior of the future. So congratulations. Thank you for attending this conference. Thank you very much. Everything has been translated and it's going to be on all social networks to promote the fashion industry as it is well represented and shown here at Tex World. There will be a show next door at 11. The show is all yours. You know each other, you met here, but today there's a network, we've been talking. So we have to start working together. There was a club that was set up. We need generosity. We need to help each other and work together. So let's stay in touch. In Pantin, Aubervilliers, Quatre Chemins, come visit us, Gilles. Come see our studio over there. You're going to be most welcome over there.
Avant de vous inviter en Bretagne.
Come and visit the show we did set up until the end of April. Paper inside and inside, everything you always thought of, or everything you wanted to see about paper. It's a wonderful show.